Good morning and welcome to FolkScape Live's broadcast here from the Thursday morning concert at the Sidmouth Folk Festival, as ever. And I'm joined by the performers for the second half of that concert, Angeline Morrison and Cohen Braithwaite Kilcoyne, which is it's a short story in its own right. Cohen, I'll come to you in a moment. Angeline, thanks very much for joining us. Tell us, what can we expect in this set?
You can expect some traditional song, some original compositions that sound traditional. Cohen is joining me for a couple of numbers on vocals and Anglo concertina, and most of all, songs about the lost and forgotten black history of these islands.
Well, we'll come to that in a bit, because folk has sort of forgotten that story in a way, hasn't it? But let's talk about that in a moment. Cohen, what's an Anglo concertina? For a start, that sounds xenophobic in its own right. What's wrong with a Franco concertina? What is your contribution here?
The concertina, so it's a small hexagonal squeeze box instrument, and there's several different types of concertinas, and the Anglo is just the type that I play.
And which songs are you helping Angeline out with?
So I'm playing on two of Angeline's original songs from the Sorrow Songs album, which I'm sure you'll come to ask. A song called The Beautiful Spotted Black Boy, which is a sort of a Victorian fairground style song. So I'm being the fairground organ on that, on the concertina, and then doing some group vocals on a song called Hide Yourself.
Angeline, you were saying that the black story of Britain has been sort of forgotten by folk, and it's a story we think of from, I don't know, John Hawkins in the 1560s and the slave triangle, and that aspect of the British relationship with Africans, people of African origin. But it's far older than that.
It very much predates that, and we have evidence for a black presence in these islands going back to Roman times, at least. And I have to say at least, because that's only as far back as the evidence goes. So there's going to be more than there is existing evidence for. And you say it's very interesting. You say it's been forgotten by folk. But the thing is, the bigger picture is that the black history of these islands has been lost and forgotten by mainstream history. So it kind of stands to reason that it will also be forgotten by folk. But my feeling is that the folk and traditional songs are where we should be able to go to find those lost and forgotten stories. People who are overlooked, people who are downtrodden in life, people who didn't necessarily have a voice. I feel like we ought to be able to find those stories in the folk music and the music of the people. So that's where my album comes from, really.
And it's important to say that you say downtrodden and lost, but that's not the whole history of the black presence in the folk culture, by which I mean folk culture with the capital F, not as opposed to written down culture in documents in roll scrolls and things like that. But it's not entirely a story of oppression, and certainly not. It wasn't when the Romans were here. There were several black emperors.
That's exactly right, yes. And it's really important that you said that, because we have to remember that the bigger picture of black history is it contains great highs and examples of excellence and leadership and all sorts of things. It isn't just about enslavement and that history.
And thriving and power and success as well.
And
cultural success. Cohen, why is it that modern folk music hasn't recognised this vast part of British culture, this rich part of British culture?
Oh, that's a very good question. I suspect partly it's just a lack of knowledge. It's not something that has really come to the forefront until very recently. Certainly not on the folk scene. Until Angeline came along last year with her album, I don't think anyone on the folk scene was talking about this sort of stuff. Yeah.
Well, this is a great gathering of the folk world here at Sidmouth, and with the very greatest respect to these lovely people who have no malice or sinister aspect to them whatsoever, an awful lot of us do look like Gandalf.
Fair enough. No comment.
And that's no criticism of anybody at all. Should mention that album, Angeline. It's Sorrow Songs, folk songs of Black British experience. That was released last year. How's that gone?
It's gone amazing. The album was actually voted the Guardian's Folk Album of the Year, so that was a real moment. That was in 2022, but we are still the reigning folk album of the year. There hasn't been a new one yet, so we're just enjoying that. And yeah, the reception has been absolutely lovely. People have shown genuine interest. People want to come and chat to us after gigs, and that's lovely because a lot of people have got information, stories, bits of local knowledge about maybe the grave of an African in their local area, or memories from childhood of black people living in their towns or villages from all over the country. It's really it's been wonderful. It's been a really fantastic experience.
I have to mention, this is just a particular interest of my own as a historian, as a naval historian, that from certainly 1808 anyway, sorry, I'm the real precise dates here, that the Royal Navy has been one of the most open, unracist aspects of British institutional life, simply because they wanted to take as many sailors as possible. They were always short of them, and so that was always, and there is a great folk tradition of sea songs, isn't there? Does that ever creep through? Is there a maritime separate sort of subgenre of folk that's a little bit more recognising of a cosmopolitan world?
That's a very interesting question, and I think probably the main maritime subgenre of folk would be sea shanties, wouldn't it? And that there is a lot of discussion now and a lot of scholarship. Jim McGeehan of the Keelers is one of the main scholars on this, which suggests that possibly even the majority of the shanties that we know now may have been of black origin.
Really? So there's that goes all the way back. That's the roots of the idea of, whatever it is you're singing when you're turning the capstan or lifting the anchor. I don't know what a capstan is, but that goes back to it. That has an African origin.
Not the turning of the capstan itself, but the tradition of work songs.
Yes.
The tradition of work songs. I mean, that's a global tradition, isn't it? That's all across the planet. People have sung as they worked, but the particular field hollers and call and response nature of the work songs of enslaved Africans in the Americas and in the Caribbean plantations, it's thought that a lot of those singing traditions made it on board ship with the people.
Well, that would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, that's perfectly so. I've just been reading your notes a little bit on your website, and I'm particularly delighted that you talk about weird folk, and you spell it W-Y-R-D, like the Weird Sisters in the Scottish play, and we are too close to that stage to name that play, incidentally. I'm sorry. I've made that mistake before. I'm not superstitious, and then lights have fallen down in studios and things like that. So
Let's not take the risk.
let's not take the risk. But I love that. And you've also talk about it being psych folk. What do you mean by those two words, weird in that lovely old poetic way, and psych? What do you mean by that?
Well, I always spell weird in the lovely old poetic way because for me that's the correct spelling with the Y, because when I'm applying that to the version of folk music, the iteration of folk music that I mostly embody, not necessarily so much on this album, but in some ways, it's where folk and traditional music intersects with the mysterious and the ancient and the spiritual, spooky things. I'm very attracted to the ancient and the mysterious and the spooky.
Well, it's the nebulous and the numiscent, isn't it? And it's the edges. That's where you find the magic.
Oh, you do find the magic at the edges and in the liminal places that are not necessarily one thing or the other, not necessarily identifiable as one particular thing or another thing, and so the boundaries blur, and there you can get exciting, magical things happening.
Brilliant. I'm looking forward to it so much. Angeline, thank you very much for talking to us. Cohen, I'm really looking forward to hearing your playing of only ever English instruments. the Anglo concertina. I'm so much looking forward to that. Angeline and Cohen will be playing in the second half of this lunchtime's concert. It'll be Keres Hafana going on first. I've just listened to her sound checking and it sounds absolutely beautiful. Talk about ethereal. That's a good word there, playing a triple harp. I'll be talking to her, I hope, in the interval, but let's, for now, go on into the auditorium and join the audience as they wait for her.